Alright, peace, brothers and sisters. Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, give an honor and praise to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. Give a double honors to 7130 South Chicago that taught me this truth. Give a double honors to all the brothers and sisters that the Creator has awoken in these last days. With that being said, peace and shalom. Alright, so we're in the third part 3. They didn't bring no negroes to America. They brought the nation of Israel to America. So another book or reference that I'm going to be looking at is basically Dr. Lee Cummings, The Negro Question, Part 5, Joseph, and the 12th Dynasty of Egypt. Okay, so it says image location, Tomb Ben Hassan. It says Tomb Ben Hassan, Egypt. Interior Tomb Ben Hassan, Egypt. It says this is the interior. This is the interior to the tomb at Ben Hassan in Egypt. It was the tomb of the chief steward and royal advisor, Kum Hotep of the 12th Dynasty of Egypt. It says this chapter will focus on the hieroglyphic painted. It says the hieroglyphics painted on the walls of this tomb. After we have examined the evidence, the world historians will have to admit that we have found the Joseph of the Bible. Joseph from Cairo Museum. Location of image, Cairo Museum, Joseph as Kum Hotep, right? So it says, this image was found in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, Egypt, and on the back of the coin, the name written, Joseph, Viceroy of Egypt. It says the report in Al-Haram boasts that this find backs up the Quran's claim that coins were used in Egypt during Joseph's generation. So what the reason why I'm showing this is that our history transcends what you would call Egypt, right? I mean, transcends what you would call the transatlantic slave trade. It's because, see, what I'm showing is that, see, they didn't bring no Negroes to America. They didn't bring no African Americans, Kums and Shans. See, they brought the nation of Israel to America. See, and this is one of our ancestors, which is what they would call Joseph of the Bible, or in the Egyptian term, Kum Hotep, right? Because he was the viceroy over Egypt. So it says, the researchers discovered, let me pull this up a little bit. It says the researchers discovered the coins when they sifted through thousands of small archaeological artifacts stored in the vaults of the Museum of Egypt. It says the coins, one second. It says the coins bore the year that they were minted. It says their values and effigies of the pharaohs who ruled at the time of their minting. Joseph was called Kum Hotep during the 12th dynasty. It says this Kum Hotep boasts on the wall. It says this Kum Hotep boasts on the walls of the Ben Hassan tomb that in the time of the great famine, no man, woman, or child, that in the time of the great famine, no man, woman, or child wanted for food. Kum Hotep held the title of chief steward and viceroy. This was the first time in the history of Egypt that these dual titles were held by one one man, right? So let's look at some. Let's see if we can find this in the Bible, right? Right, because like I said, the Bible is the so-called black man's history. Because Joseph was an individual that quote unquote stopped the famine from Egypt for a good period of time, right? 1 second. Let me find Joseph real quick in history. Because, Joseph, he was basically a prominent figure in Egypt, right? 1 second. Because I think it was going to be some 12 years of famine and 12 years of good and plenty, right? One second. Because like I say, man, history, they don't really tell you about America don't really tell you about our history. You know what I'm saying? They don't tell you really about our history. It's because they basically took our history from us, right? Let me read this, right? This is the 41st chapter of the book of Genesis. It says, Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself and changed his raiment and came in unto Pharaoh. Right? So it says, And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have a dream. I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard, it says, and I have heard say of thee, that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me. Yah shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. It says, Pharaoh said unto Joseph, In my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river, and behold, they came up the river 7 kine, fat-fleshed and well-favored, and they fed in the meadow. And it says, And behold, 7 other kine came up after them, poor and very ill-favored, and least-fleshed. And it says, Such as I have never saw in all the land of Egypt for badness. And it says, And the lean and the ill-favored kind did eat up the first 7 fat kine. And when they had eaten them up, it could not be known that they had eaten them. It says, But they were still ill-favored. As at the beginning, so I awoke, and I saw in my dream, behold, 7 ears came up, and 1 stalk full of good. And it says, And behold, 7 ears withered then, and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. And it says, And the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears. And I told this unto the magicians, but there was none that could declare it to me. Joseph said unto Pharaoh, The dream of Pharaoh is one. Yah have showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 good kine are 7 years, and 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. So instead of 12, I guess it was 7. It says, And the 7 thin and ill-favored kine that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears blasted with east wind shall be 7 years of famine. It says, "This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh, what Yah is about to do." And he showed unto Pharaoh, "Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt, and there shall arise them 7 years of famine, and all plenty shall be forgotten in the lands of Egypt, and famine shall consume the land." And it says, "And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous." It says, "And for that the dream was double unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by Yah Elohim will surely bring it to pass. Now, therefore, let Pharaoh look out a man." It says, "Now, therefore, let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the fifth part of the land of Egypt. And in 7 plenteous years, let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. And that," it says, "and that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine." So, when we read in this book, Joseph's name was called Kum Hotep, right? It says the coin bore the year that they were minted, their values and effigies of the Pharaoh who ruled in that time of their minting. It says Joseph was called Kum Hotep during the 12th dynasty. This Kum Hotep boasts on the walls of Ben Hassan tomb that in the time of the great famine, no man, woman, or child wanted for food. So we was just reading that, you know what I'm saying? And it says Kum Hotep held the title of chief steward and advisor. This was the first time in the history of Egypt that these dual titles were ever, it says, were held by one man. The story of Israel and Egypt have been written like a loaf of bread. One half of the loaf deals with the gathering of food, and the other half deals with the hard bondage in Egypt. The 12th dynasty of Egypt is the Joseph story and can be found in the 41st to 47th chapter. See, we just reading that of Genesis. The 18th dynasty is Moses' Exodus story and can be found in the 1st to the 14th chapter of the book of Exodus. It says, "I have had the opportunity to see, to handle, and to examine the same evidence that the historians and archaeologists have examined. I weighed the evidence on a scale, and I am convinced that we are looking at one of the greatest cover-ups that the world has ever seen. Besides Esau passing for Israel, the controlling of archaeological digs, books, and education is the mechanism that the system uses to maintain its grip on the minds of this society." It says, "We are like the water beneath the waterfall. We are like a hole in the ship at sea, and we are like the tree that falls in the forest. We are like blind men being let go in a four-way intersection. We are in great distress, and we don't even know it." And see, when we talk about the great distress, what are we talking about? We're talking about how we're being miseducated as a nation of people. See? But all of this is prophesied, brothers and sisters, because, see, our ancestors had a duty. See, and our duty was to do the bidding of the Creator in the earth. See? And we failed to do that. See, we failed to do that as a nation of people, and as a result, we had to endure what you would call a prison sentence. And see, the prison sentence that we had to endure was basically what? Slavery, brothers and sisters. See, so I was just showing one of the pictures of our ancestor Joseph that was called Kun Hotep, and in Egypt, that he held the office of chief vizier, and that his job was to maintain the food supply so that the Egyptians and the people that was around about that was living over there in Egypt, that they wouldn't die of the famine, you know. So let's look at something. Let's look at the 17th chapter of the book of Jeremiah, right? 17th chapter of the book of Jeremiah. Chapter of the book of Jeremiah. And it reads as such: And thou even thyself shalt discontinue from thy heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thy enemies in the land which thou knowest not. For ye have kindled a fire in my anger. And it says, which shall burn forever. Let's match that scripture with Hosea 4:6, right? Hosea 4:6. So what is somebody you're gonna be disconnected? You're gonna lose the knowledge of self. See, you're not gonna be able to maintain your history, and that's what slavery did to us. It didn't allow us to transmit history down to our kids. So it says, my people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. And see, that's what's wrong with us today. This is why we're in the neighborhoods. This is why we're killing each other in the neighborhoods. This is why we have bad politicians, bad religious figures and stuff like that, you know, is because we are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. See, there's no peoplehood in our communities. See, it's no peoplehood. It's because if you don't understand nationality and who you are from a nationalistic standpoint of view, brothers and sisters, you are destroyed. See, and you are prey to all the other nations, because all the other nations, what they do is they have taken part in quote unquote exploiting you. See, so it says, my people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge, because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee. And see, when the Creator was saying this, he was talking to who? To the ancestors. So he was talking to our ancestors. It's because they knew the knowledge of self. They knew who they were. But they wanted to be just like the Egyptians. See, they wanted to be just like the other nations. And as a result of that, the Creator allowed us to be with these nations. But as a result, the Creator put us in slavery, under servitude, under these nations. See, I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no more priest, meaning that what? Priest is just a representative of the Creator, right? A spokesman for the Creator, a leader in the earth, that thou shalt no more be, it says that thou shalt be no priest to me, saying thou hast forgotten the law of thy power. And see, the law is basically the so-called black man's constitution when he was in his own land. See, they had to go by laws that govern the people and laws on how we serve the Creator. I will also forget thy children. And who is the children? It's us today, brothers and sisters. See, we are the children of these people. See? So we brought over here in the wilderness of North America, we're not allowed to transmit history down to the kids. This is why we don't know who we are. See? So the curses happened to our forefathers, and then later on, it happened to us too. But we caught the bitter end of it is because now we're having what you would call a culture shock. See? No, not a culture shock, an identity crisis. See, that's what we having. We having an identity crisis. We don't even know who we are, where our land is, what type of people are we. See, we still in 2003 got people graduating, our people graduating with master's degrees, right? Because they done went through the educational systems of the country and they still calling themselves blacks and colors. See, this is how we have been destroyed as a nation of people. But let's get back to the book, right? It says, this is some of the pictures. It says the Kumhotep servants weighing grain from the 12th dynasty of Egypt. These are some of the pictures. It says, this scene comes to us from the tomb of Ben Hassan in Egypt, depicting the Egyptians weighing the cultivated grain. This is the time of Joseph / Kumhotep. And I date this image to 1913 because this is the date that Joseph became the co-ruler of Egypt. See, so when our people was in there, it's going to come a period of time where another pharaoh going to come on the scene and say he doesn't know Joseph. See, he don't know Joseph, but in actuality, he does know Joseph. It was just that our people was prominent in quote unquote Mizraim or Egypt or Kemet. That see, we was in Kemet, brothers and sisters. See, look, this is before we became slaves in Egypt. See, we was living in Egypt, brothers and sisters. We was living in Egypt. We was living deliciously until the children of Egypt started to come against us over there. So I'm just showing you that our history transcends the transatlantic slave trade, brothers and sisters. It says this day began the great ingathering of the harvest in the land of Egypt. So what they saying is that the tomb of Ben Hassan, right, in Egypt, is depicting this story. So let's continue to read, right? Where did I leave off at? Matter of fact, let's go back to the 41st chapter of the book of Genesis. See, this is our history, brothers and sisters. But we don't understand it is because in slavery, we was taught that this is not our history. See, that the so-called black man, the reason why he was turned black is because he rebelled against the Creator. And as a result of this, in order for us to be redeemed back to who we once were, we got to get up under the Caucasian. This is what has been taught to us as a people, see? And we have to understand this, right? 1 second. Let me start at the 36th verse of the 41st chapter, 37th verse of the 41st chapter of the book of Genesis. It says, and the thing was good. It says, seven eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of this servant. Let me see if this is the right chapter, because I don't think that this is the right chapter. I'm going to start at the 25th verse, and then we're just going to read it down. It says, Joseph said unto Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. Yahweh have showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 good kine are 7 years, and 7 good years are seven years. The dream is one. The 7 thin, ill-favored kind that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty years, blasted with the east wind, shall be 7 years of famine. So when we looking at this, brothers and sisters, see, this is up on the B'nai Hassan tomb. See, this is depicted, and Joseph is depicted as Hotep. See, that's who he is depicted as, right? But I'm trying to get to the point where Joseph started to the process. One second. When Joseph started the process of the ingathering, see, I'm gonna start at still at the 41st chapter. I'm gonna start at the 45th verse. It says, Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zapnath Paneah, right? But in the B'nai Hassan, the tomb of B'nai Hassan, because I guess they talking about the 12th dynasty, they calling him Hotep, see? And it says, and he gave him to wife, it says, Asenath, the daughter of Poti-Phara, priest of On. Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt, or Mizraim, or Kemet. And Yosef was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. And in 7 plenteous years, the earth brought forth by handfuls. And he gathered up all the food of 7 years, which were in the land of Egypt, laid up the food in the cities, the food of the field which was round about every city laid he up in the same. And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea very much until he left numbering. For it was numbered without, it says, for it without number. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came. And Asenath, the daughter of Poti-Phara, priest of On, bare unto him. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh. For Yah said, he have made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. It says, and the name of the second called Ephraim. For Yah have caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. And the 7 years of plenteous that was in the land of Egypt were ended, and the 7 years of dearth began to come, according to Joseph had said, and the earth was in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto the Egyptians, go unto Joseph, and what he saith to you, do. So the Egyptians, they had a sense of spirituality just as well. See, a lot of these new guys, these Kemet dudes, or these Afrocentric guys that follow Egypt, they try to act like that they didn't have no sense of spirituality and things. They didn't believe in God. You know what I'm saying? They did, but a lot of them looked at themselves as gods. You know what I'm saying? And it says, but see, the Egyptians, a lot of them was worshiping Nimrod as God. See, you know what I mean? So it says, and the famine was over all the face of the earth, And Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold unto the Egyptians. And the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt. And it says, and all the countries came in to Egypt to Joseph to buy corn, because that the famine was so sore in the land of Egypt. So what is this, brother? See, this is black history. This is so-called black history or Israelite history. It's because our people was living in Egypt, brothers and sisters. See, we they didn't bring no negroes to America, brothers and sisters. They brought the nation of Israel to America. These are some of the pictures. Measuring the wheat and deposited in the grain. What's this? The grain era, the grand era, right? This is the 12th dynasty of Egypt. So you got to go back and research this. See, Joseph was considered, he went by the name of Kun Hotel. See? Image location. Tomb, Benai Hassan in Egypt. This is what they saying. It says, these images of grain being met. We just read that in the 41st chapter of the book of Genesis, starting at, let me get it. 1 second. Starting at the 45th verse, brothers and sisters, we was reading that. See, that's our history. That's not Max Kellerman and all the rest of those people. You know, Max Kellerman talking about we were slaves in Egypt. And you know, Stephen A. Smith, which he knows he's Israel, he let him get away with it. See? We all know that the original images that's over there on the walls of Egypt is so-called black people, brothers. That's why we need to be just like the Muslims. They go to quote-unquote Mecca for Hajj and things of this nature. They walk around the Kaaba stone 7 times, right? Which a lot of them stole that from us. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna talk about that one time on the channel. But, you know, we need to be going to these places. You know, it's cool to go to New York, 50 states in America and see these places, but we need to go to Africa. See? We need to go to Africa. We need to go to different parts of Africa. We need to go to the west coast of Africa. We need to visit our homeland in Israel and stuff like that. We need to go visit Egypt. See, we need to be looking at this stuff, because if we're going to be archaeologists and students or whatever, or we just want to understand the history, we have to go to these places. You know what I'm saying? Why every time that we go on vacation, we got to go to Mexico, or we got to go to these different states? That's not our rest, brothers and sisters. See? It says these images of grain being measured, placed into granaries were taken from the tomb of Ben Hassan. See, you got to look that up. See, Ben Hassan, which dates to the 12th dynasty of Egypt. It says these images are being shown to you for one purpose, and the purpose is what? To prove to you without a shadow of doubt that the Joseph of the Bible has indeed been found in the 12th dynasty of Egypt. See, so if you're a historian, which I am, we got to go back and research this. See, this is on, I guess, the tomb of Ben Hassan during the 12th dynasty. See, this is the 12th dynasty. These are images that he located. It says, Southern Raw, Tomb Ben Hassan, Egypt. This image, and see, another thing the reason why we have to go to these places because, see, the Caucasian is still practicing white supremacy. And what is he doing? He's, they're still, they call it iconoclasm, where they repaint the walls. They paint over this stuff, and they turn these people, quote unquote, pale skin, white looking. That's why it's very important for us, brothers and sisters. Just like people talk about it's important for you to vote and all this type, it's very important for us, brothers and sisters, to go to these places and to take pictures so that we can bring it back to our people and show them that the people that's on the walls of Egypt, that was slaves in Egypt, is our people, brothers and sisters. And look, the so-called Egyptians and the Israelites, they looked alike. See? They looked alike. It says the images is of the Egyptians bringing a grain, placed them in the granary. I have showed, I already read all this. I didn't read it again. I have showed the image down on the next page so that you can see it in the stages that the Egyptian scribe painted it. See, we read the 41st chapter of the book of Genesis. The Egyptians are bringing their herds for bags of corn and grain. In the book of Genesis 47, 16 through 18, verses 16, Joseph said, "Bring me your cattle, and I will give you for cattle if your money fails." Verse 17, and they brought their cattle to Joseph. Look at the image above, and you can clearly see that in this 12th dynasty tomb, the people are bringing their cattle for bags of grain or corn. See, because this goes to all the people that sit back and talk about that this stuff is a myth. See, this is history, brothers and sisters, right? So let's look at the 47th chapter, verses 16 through 18. Let me get that. 47th chapter of the book of Genesis, verses 16 through 18, right? Matter of fact, start at 15. And when the money fell in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said, "Give us bread, for why should we die in thy presence? For the money failed," right? So it says, Joseph said, "Give your cattle, and I will give you for your cattle if money fail." And they brought their cattle unto Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for horses, and for the flocks, and for the cattle. It says, and the herds, and for the asses, and he fed them with bread for all their cattle for that year. See? It says, and when that year was ended, they came unto him the second year, and said unto him, "We will not hide it from my master or Adonai, how that our money is spent. Adonai also have our herds." It says, "My Adonai also have our herds of cattle. There is not aught left in the sight of my Adonai but our bodies and our lands." And Adonai just represents what? Lord or master. It says, "Wherefore shall we die before thy eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants unto Pharaoh, and give us seed, that we may live and not die, that the land be not desolate." And Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for the Egyptians sold every man his field, because the famine prevailed over them. So the land became Pharaoh's. So this is us in Egypt, brothers and sisters. See, this is us in Egypt. When you're talking about us, I'm talking about, well, this is before. Let me backtrack. This is before the nation of Israel came to Egypt, 70 souls, brothers and sisters. But this is our ancestor Joseph. Joseph was the manager of, quote unquote, the banking system of Egypt, brothers and sisters, because they had what you would call an economic collapse. Like their money had failed. It was a famine in the land. So the reason why Pharaoh was having a dream is because the Creator was basically telling Joseph through Pharaoh that it was going to be 7 good years and it was going to be 7 bad years. So all in total is 14 years, right, that Joseph was handling the money situation in Egypt. Because what was the money during that time? It was what you would call, quote unquote, the corn, the grains, and things of this nature. Horses. They were trading back then. People were farmers back then. They was using their cattle and things of this nature as a means of money exchange. And then later on, it changed from that to the people started to sell themselves as collateral to maintain themselves during the famine. And they was also selling what? Their lands, brothers and sisters. So I just want to backtrack. The whole nation of Israel is not there yet. I'm talking about the 70 souls that came into Egypt. But Joseph is there. Joseph is Israel, brothers and sisters. See, this is our ancestor. This is who was controlling, quote unquote, the economics in Egypt during the 12th dynasty, brothers and sisters. Under the tomb of Hassan, Bena Hassan, see, 12th dynasty. And Joseph went by the name of Kum Hotep. So it says, Joseph said, bring me your cattle and I will give you for cattle if your money fails. Because, they was using, silver coins and things of this nature. But all that stuff had failed. See, that stuff collapsed. It says, verse 17, they brought their cattle to Joseph. Look at the image above and you can clearly see, this is them. This is the Egyptians bringing their cattle to Joseph because he was the head man, because Pharaoh put him in that position. See, they didn't speak to Pharaoh. The Pharaoh told them to speak to Joseph. See, tell Joseph what's going on, and Joseph gonna take care of it. It said, now this is another image. It says the image was cropped off the image above in the tomb of Bena Hassan, and it depicted the Egyptians reapers bringing grain on jackasses to the granaries. You would do well to take notice of the jackasses in the image, because the jackass was more common in the 12th dynasty of Egypt than what? The horse, right? According to the modern historian, the horse was introduced into Egypt by the Hyksos. It says, this coupled with the information given by the Egyptian historian Manetho, because I think Manetho, I think he was trying to erase Israel out of certain pages of history. I think that he was trying to do that, but I got to look more into that. It says history of what they call the Jews, but we understand that that's a new word, brothers. They didn't go by that back then. Josephus, page 611, said that the Hyksos had been in Egypt 518 years, gives us some desperately needed information to arrive at a date for the horses introduced to Egypt. So they say that basically the horses wasn't common to Egypt. The Hyksos brought them in. So it says Amos expels Hyksos 1550. Manetho Hyksos in Egypt 1518. Hyksos bring horse into Egypt. It says, I like to fluctuate a date for the Hyksos 2068, 2061. It says, Josephus, the Antiquities of the Israelites, page 611. It says the horse supposedly was introduced into Egypt around 2068 BC, and the 12th dynasty of Egypt came into being around 1991 BC. I use the word supposedly because of a scene on the wall in the tomb of Ben Hassan. Let's continue. Hassan shows the Hyksos walking with jackasses. It says, if the Hyksos introduced the horse into Egypt, then why aren't there any horses with them in the tomb scenes? Think about it. It appears that the horse was already in Egypt based on the information given into the Hebrew history book Bible. If the Hyksos entered Egypt in 2068 BC, that would place the horse in Egypt 125 years before the birth of Joseph, 1943 BC, 150 years before Pharaoh Amenhotep II gave him a horse and chariot. It says Buchan Horse location, Khartoum Museum, London. So you have to. So if you're a historian, brothers and sisters, or you want to learn about your history, you have to go to these places, man. The skeleton remains of the horse that the scholars named the Buchan horse were found at the fortress of Buchan near the second cataract of the Nile in southern Sudan. All right. The image location, Wikipedia Encyclopedia, the fortress dates back to the 12th dynasty of Egypt. It says, it means that the 12th dynasty not only had horses, but probably used them in warfare. This means that no matter what direction they bring the flight, the archaeology lines up with the history of the Hebrews. It says, why am I giving you this information? Buchan skeleton validates the sentence in the Hebrew history book Genesis 47 and 17, and said the Egyptians brought their horses to Joseph for corn. It says the $1 million question is this: how do I know that the 12th dynasty of Egypt is Joseph's generation, and how can I be sure when the scholars aren't? I have something in my possession that the so-called scholars, doctors of these major universities don't have. It says, and that is a timeline that Yah gave the angel Gabriel. This timeline was given to Daniel by the angel Gabriel in the 7th chapter of the book of Daniel. It says, when I first saw it, I didn't fully comprehend what Gabriel had given to Daniel. He gave Daniel a chapter out of the scriptures of truth. But he really gave Daniel was a key to the history of the world's past, right? So what I'm going to do, brothers and sisters, I'm going to leave it off here. And then I'm going to come back to part 4 of They Didn't Bring No Negroes to America, dealing with the history of Joseph in Egypt. Shalom.